The academy's loudspeaker crackled to life, the sound cutting through the afternoon silence like a blade. Every cadet in formation turned as one, their synchronized movement a testament to months of rigorous training. Cadet Zara Okafor, report to the command office immediately. Standing in the third row, 26-year-old Zara Okafor felt every eye in the courtyard settle on her. Her dark skin glistened with a thin sheen of sweat from the day's exercises, her hair pulled back in regulation style, revealing intelligent brown eyes that had seen too much dismissal, too much doubt. Welcome to the Black Side Stories. Before we continue, tell me in the comments from which city in the world are you watching this video today. And if you believe women like Zara deserve to be remembered, subscribe to our channel and help us share their stories. She stepped forward with practiced precision, her boots clicking against the concrete as whispers followed in her wake. Someone snickered. Another voice, barely audible but crystal clear to her ears. Guess the diversity hire couldn't cut it after all. Zara said nothing. She'd learned long ago that responding only fed the flames. But as she walked toward the administrative building, her hand unconsciously moved to the small medallion beneath her uniform. Her grandfather's distinguished flying cross, awarded for heroism in the Korean War. Captain Marcus Donovan was waiting for her, his pale blue eyes cold as winter sky. At 35, he was everything the Air Force valued: pedigree, connections, and the kind of confident arrogance that came from never having to prove himself. Cadet Okafor, he began, not bothering to look up from the file in his hands. After careful review of your performance metrics, the evaluation board has determined that you do not meet the psychological profile required for advanced fighter pilot training. The words hit like a physical blow. Zara had anticipated this moment. The signs had been building for weeks, but hearing it made real felt like watching her dreams crash and burn. Sir, if I may ask what specific deficiencies, the decision is final, Donovan interrupted, his tone suggesting the conversation was already over. You have 48 hours to clear your belongings from the barracks. But what Captain Donovan didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Zara Okafor wasn't just another cadet with big dreams. She was the granddaughter of Colonel Samuel Thunder Okafor, one of the first black fighter pilots to serve in integrated units. She was the daughter of Major Patricia Okafor, who had flown transport missions in 3 different conflicts before an injury grounded her permanently. And she had been flying since she was 8 years old. The Okafor family farm in rural Georgia wasn't just agricultural land. It was a sanctuary where aviation lived and breathed. Samuel Okafor had purchased the property in 1965 with his military savings, converting part of it into a small airstrip where he restored vintage aircraft and taught local kids the fundamentals of flight. Zara's earliest memories were of the sound of propeller engines and the smell of aviation fuel mixed with red Georgia clay. Her grandfather, a tall man with graying temples and eyes that sparkled with mischief, had taken her up in his restored P-51 Mustang for the first time when she was barely tall enough to see over the instrument panel. Flying isn't about the machine, Little Thunder, he'd told her, using the nickname that stuck throughout her childhood. It's about understanding the conversation between pilot and sky. Some people speak that language naturally. Others never learn it, no matter how much training they get. By age 12, Zara could identify aircraft by sound alone. By 16, she was performing maintenance that impressed veteran mechanics twice her age. When she won the regional youth aviation competition 3 years running, people started talking about the Okafor girl who flew like she'd been born with wings. Her parents had always been supportive, but it was her grandfather who truly understood her passion. Before his death when she was 19, he'd pressed his distinguished flying cross into her palm. This belongs to a pilot who refused to let anyone tell them they couldn't fly, he'd whispered. Now it belongs to you. The medal had become her talisman, a physical reminder of the legacy she carried and the dreams she refused to abandon. What Zara didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that her struggles at the academy weren't random. From the moment her application had crossed Captain Donovan's desk, she'd been marked. The previous year, Donovan had been passed over for promotion to major, a career blow that he attributed to the military's diversity initiatives. In his mind, qualified candidates like himself were being overlooked in favor of minorities who checked the right boxes but lacked the proper breeding for elite military service. When Zara's file landed on his desk, stellar test scores, exceptional flight hours, but the wrong last name and the wrong skin color, Donovan saw an opportunity to prove his point. Working with a small group of like-minded instructors, he began implementing subtle sabotage. Equipment malfunctions during critical evaluations, simulator programs that glitched at crucial moments, navigation systems that mysteriously recalibrated mid-flight. Have you ever been publicly singled out for failure when you knew you deserved better? Drop your story in the comments. We know those moments burn into your memory forever. Each incident was carefully documented as cadet error. Each failure was attributed to Zara's inability to handle pressure or adapt to military protocols. On paper, everything looked legitimate, but Donovan had made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated the people who believed in Zara Okafor. Master Sergeant Carlos Rivera had been maintaining aircraft for 22 years. A second-generation Mexican-American from San Antonio, he'd earned his position through skill, dedication, and an almost supernatural ability to diagnose mechanical problems. He'd been watching Zara since her first week at the academy, initially drawn by her obvious mechanical aptitude. Unlike most cadets, who saw maintenance as beneath them, Zara asked questions, learned procedures, and demonstrated an intuitive understanding of aircraft systems that reminded Rivera of the best pilots he'd ever worked with. When her evaluations started showing inconsistencies, perfect scores in controlled environments, mysterious failures during official assessments, Rivera began paying closer attention. The pattern became clear during Zara's 7th week. Rivera had personally inspected the T-6 Texan she was scheduled to fly for her navigation evaluation. Every system was functioning perfectly, but when Zara returned from her flight, visibly frustrated and confused, the aircraft's GPS showed calibration errors that hadn't existed an hour earlier. "Someone's been messing with your bird," Rivera told her quietly as they stood in the hangar that evening. Question is, who and why? Lieutenant Colonel Angela Hayes was another matter entirely. At 42, she was one of the highest-ranking black women in the Air Force, a position she'd earned through a combination of exceptional skill, political savvy, and the kind of quiet determination that didn't advertise itself. Hayes had heard whispers about the Okafor situation through unofficial channels. She'd also heard whispers about Captain Donovan's attitude toward diversity in the ranks. As someone who'd fought similar battles herself, she recognized the signs. Unlike Rivera, Hayes couldn't act openly without risking her own career. But she could observe, document, and position herself to act when the moment was right. The third member of Zara's unlikely support network was the person she least expected, Cadet Tyler Morrison, Captain Donovan's golden boy and the son of a 3-star general. Morrison had grown up in military circles, attending the right schools and knowing the right people. His acceptance to the academy had been a foregone conclusion, his success virtually guaranteed by his connections and pedigree. But Morrison wasn't just another privileged cadet coasting on family influence. He was genuinely talented, genuinely dedicated, and genuinely troubled by what he was witnessing. During a joint simulation exercise, Morrison had watched Zara handle a complex emergency scenario with skill that surpassed most of their instructors. Her creative solutions and calm under pressure had impressed everyone in the control room. Yet somehow, her official evaluation showed substandard performance. When Morrison approached Captain Donovan with questions about the discrepancy, the captain's response had been revealing. "Sometimes the scores don't tell the whole story, cadet. We have to consider factors beyond raw performance, breeding, instinct, the kind of qualities that can't be measured but make the difference in real combat situations." The implication was clear, and it made Morrison's stomach turn. The night before Zara's scheduled departure from the academy, Rivera made a decision that would define the rest of his career. Using his master access codes, he pulled up the maintenance logs for every aircraft Zara had flown during her evaluations. What he found was damning: a pattern of routine adjustments made by authorized personnel just before Zara's flights, followed by corrections immediately afterward. The timing was too perfect to be coincidental. More importantly, Rivera discovered something else. Captain Donovan had been making similar adjustments to aircraft flown by other minority cadets over the past 3 years. Hayes, meanwhile, had been conducting her own investigation through official channels. Her position gave her access to evaluation records that revealed disturbing patterns in scoring across different demographics. When Rivera and Hayes compared their findings, the scope of the conspiracy became clear. This wasn't just about Zara Okafor. It was systematic discrimination disguised as objective evaluation. But they needed proof that would stand up to scrutiny, and they needed it fast. The plan they developed was audacious and potentially career-ending for everyone involved. But it was also the only way to expose the truth and give Zara the chance she deserved. Hayes used her authority to delay Zara's departure by 24 hours, citing administrative complications. Rivera, meanwhile, prepared a special surprise: access to the Academy's most advanced flight simulator, loaded with combat scenarios that would push any pilot to their limits. Morrison's role was crucial but dangerous. As Donovan's favored cadet, he had access to the captain's private evaluation protocols and flight schedules. More importantly, he had the captain's trust. "There's going to be a demonstration flight tomorrow," Morrison told Zara during their clandestine meeting in the base library. VIPs from the Pentagon, including General Patricia Williams, the first black woman to command a fighter wing. The implication was clear. If Zara was going to make her stand, this was her moment. But first, she had to prove to herself that she belonged in that cockpit. At T0200 hours, Zara slipped into the Academy's premier flight simulator. The machine hummed to life under her touch, its sophisticated systems creating a virtual environment indistinguishable from real flight. Rivera had loaded it with the most challenging scenarios in the database, combat missions that had been used to evaluate pilots with years of experience. If Zara could handle these, she could handle anything. For the next 4 hours, Zara flew mission after mission: air-to-air combat, ground attack runs, emergency landings with multiple system failures. Each scenario pushed her harder than the last, testing not just her technical skills, but her ability to think creatively under extreme pressure. The results were extraordinary. Not only did Zara complete every scenario successfully, but her performance metrics exceeded those of veteran pilots. Her intuitive understanding of aerodynamics, combined with years of real flight experience, allowed her to execute maneuvers that impressed even Rivera. "Your grandfather would be proud," the Master Sergeant said as they watched the final simulation statistics. "You've got the thunder in your blood, just like he did." But their late-night session hadn't gone unnoticed. Captain Donovan, alerted by automated security reports, arrived at the simulator facility just as Zara was powering down the systems. His face was a mask of cold fury as he took in the scene. His dismissed cadet using restricted equipment, aided by 2 of his own people. "This is highly irregular," he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Cadet Okafor, you're confined to quarters pending a disciplinary hearing. Master Sergeant Rivera, Lieutenant Colonel Hayes, you'll both be receiving formal reprimands for this breach of protocol." But Hayes stepped forward, her expression calm but determined. "Actually, Captain, what's irregular is the pattern of equipment failures that seem to follow certain cadets around. Perhaps we should discuss that instead." The confrontation that followed would have destroyed careers and ended dreams, but it was interrupted by an unexpected arrival. General Patricia Williams herself, accompanied by 2 Pentagon officials, arriving early for the next day's demonstration. "What seems to be the problem here?" the general asked, her keen eyes taking in the tension between the group. Donovan tried to control the narrative, but Hayes had prepared for this moment. In clear, precise terms, she laid out the evidence of systematic discrimination, the manipulated equipment, and the falsified evaluations. Rivera provided technical documentation. Morrison corroborated witness testimony, and Zara's simulator results spoke for themselves. General Williams listened in growing amazement and anger. As a black woman who had fought her own battles for recognition in the Air Force, she understood exactly what she was seeing. "Captain Donovan," she said finally, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded in combat, "you're relieved of duty pending a full investigation." "Master Sergeant Rivera, I want a complete technical analysis of every aircraft used in cadet evaluations for the past 3 years. Then she turned to Zara, who had remained silent throughout the confrontation. "Cadet Okafor, I understand you're scheduled to leave the academy tomorrow." "Yes, ma'am," Zara replied. her voice steady despite the emotional whirlwind of the past hour. "How would you feel about postponing that departure? I'd like to see what Thunder Okafor's granddaughter can do in a real aircraft." The demonstration flight that took place the next afternoon wasn't the carefully choreographed showcase Captain Donovan had planned. Instead, it became something far more meaningful, a test of true skill versus manufactured reputation. Zara found herself in the cockpit of an F-16 Fighting Falcon, the same type of aircraft her grandfather had dreamed of flying but never got the chance to pilot due to the limitations of his era. As she went through the pre-flight checklist, she felt his presence strongly, as if 3 generations of Okafor aviation dreams were converging in this single moment. The flight plan General Williams had approved was ambitious, complex maneuvers that would test every aspect of piloting skill. Navigation challenges, combat simulations, emergency procedures, all performed under the scrutiny of the Pentagon's most senior aviation officials. As Zara lifted off from the runway, she felt the familiar peace that came with flight. The ground fell away beneath her, and with it, the weight of months of doubt and frustration. For the next 30 minutes, she flew like she'd been born in the cockpit. Every maneuver was executed with precision that impressed even the most critical observers. When the simulation system threw multiple emergencies at her simultaneously, engine failure, navigation system crash, hydraulic problems, she handled them with the kind of calm competence that marked a natural pilot. But the most impressive moment came during the final challenge, a combat scenario that required split-second decision-making under extreme pressure. As enemy fighters closed in on her virtual position, Zara executed a series of maneuvers that weren't in any textbook, innovative solutions that utilized the F-16's capabilities in ways that surprised even its designers. When she finally touched down, the landing was so smooth that observers barely felt the aircraft contact the runway. General Williams was waiting on the tarmac when Zara climbed out of the cockpit, her flight suit soaked with sweat, but her eyes bright with the joy of perfect flight. "Outstanding, cadet," the general said, offering her hand. "That was some of the finest flying I've seen from a pilot at any level." But she wasn't done. Turning to address the gathered officials and Academy personnel, General Williams made an announcement that would change everything. "Ladies and gentlemen, what we've witnessed today is both inspiring and deeply troubling. Inspiring because we've seen the emergence of a pilot with exceptional natural ability. Troubling because that same pilot was nearly driven from the service by systematic discrimination." She gestured toward Zara, who stood at attention but couldn't hide her emotion. "The investigation into evaluation irregularities will continue, and those responsible will face appropriate consequences. But more importantly, we're implementing immediate changes to ensure that talent is recognized and nurtured regardless of background." The crowd was silent, absorbing the implications of what they'd heard. As for Cadet Okafor, General Williams continued, "Effective immediately, you're reinstated to the Academy with full honors. Moreover, upon graduation, you'll be assigned to the 99th Fighter Squadron, the modern descendants of the Tuskegee Airmen. I think your grandfather would appreciate the symbolism." The investigation that followed revealed the full scope of the discrimination conspiracy. Captain Donovan and 3 other instructors were court-martialed and dismissed from the service. 17 cadets who had been eliminated due to manipulated evaluations were offered reinstatement. Rivera was promoted to Senior Master Sergeant and assigned to head the new Aircraft Systems Integrity Program, designed to prevent future tampering. Hayes received her star, becoming Brigadier General Hayes and taking command of the Academy's diversity and inclusion initiatives. Morrison, who had risked his own future to expose the truth, found himself with a new kind of respect from his peers, the kind earned through moral courage rather than inherited privilege. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. Among Colonel Samuel Okafor's papers, which the Air Force had kept in their historical archives, investigators found detailed accounts of his own experiences with discrimination during his military service. One passage, written in 1953, seemed to speak directly across the decades to his granddaughter. "Today they told me I didn't have the right temperament for fighter pilot training. What they meant was I didn't have the right skin color. But someday, someone from our family will sit in that cockpit and show them what the Okafor blood can do in the sky." When that day comes, I hope they remember that we never gave up, never stopped believing, and never let anyone else define our limits. 18 months later, Second Lieutenant Zara Okafor stood on the same tarmac where her dreams had nearly died. But now she wore the wings of a qualified fighter pilot and the uniform of an officer in the United States Air Force. The ceremony dedicating the Colonel Samuel Thunder Okafor Memorial Flight Training Facility was attended by military officials, family members, and young people from across the country who had been inspired by Zara's story. As the crowd gathered, Zara caught sight of Rivera, now sporting his new stripes and grinning with paternal pride. Hayes, resplendent in her general's uniform, offered a small salute. Morrison, now a second lieutenant himself, gave her a thumbs up from the crowd. When called upon to speak, Zara approached the podium with the same calm confidence she brought to the cockpit. Her grandfather's distinguished flying cross gleamed on her chest, joined now by her pilot's wings and other decorations earned through merit rather than gifted through privilege. "My grandfather used to tell me that flying wasn't about the machine," she began, her voice carrying clearly across the assembled crowd. "It was about understanding the conversation between pilot and sky. Some people speak that language naturally," he said. "Others never learn it, no matter how much training they get." She paused, looking out at the faces before her, young and old, representing every background and ethnicity that made up modern America. "What he didn't tell me, what I had to learn for myself, is that sometimes people will try to convince you that you don't speak that language. They'll manipulate your equipment, falsify your scores, and create obstacles designed to make you fail. They'll tell you that you don't belong, that you don't have what it takes, that you should accept their judgment and walk away." Her voice grew stronger, carrying the passion that had sustained her through the darkest moments of doubt. "But here's what I learned. No one can clip your wings if you refuse to let them. No one can ground your dreams if you keep believing in your ability to fly. And no one can silence your thunder if you remember who you are and where you come from." The crowd erupted in applause, but Zara wasn't finished. "This facility isn't just named for my grandfather. It's dedicated to every pilot who was told they didn't belong, every dreamer who was told to give up, every person who was judged by their appearance rather than their ability. Their legacy lives on in every young person who looks at that sky and dares to believe they belong up there." As the ceremony concluded and the crowd began to disperse, Zara found herself standing alone on the tarmac where her journey had taken its darkest turn. The late afternoon sun painted the sky in shades of gold and orange, the same colors she remembered from countless flights with her grandfather. Behind her, she heard the familiar sound of jet engines spinning up. The 99th Fighter Squadron was preparing for an evening training flight, and she was scheduled to lead the formation. As she walked toward her F-16, Zara felt a deep sense of completion. The aircraft bore her grandfather's call sign, Thunder, painted beneath the canopy. But more importantly, it represented the fulfillment of a promise made generations ago that someday, a member of the Okafor family would prove that talent, determination, and integrity would ultimately triumph over prejudice and privilege. Climbing into the cockpit, Zara went through her pre-flight routine with the same methodical precision that had served her throughout her journey. But as she prepared to taxi toward the runway, she allowed herself a moment of reflection. The girl who had been publicly humiliated and dismissed as unworthy was gone. In her place sat a confident pilot, a leader, and a symbol of what was possible when justice finally prevailed. As her aircraft lifted off into the evening sky, Zara Okafor's wings caught the last rays of sunlight, transforming her into exactly what her grandfather had always known she would become: thunder given form, dreams made manifest, and proof that some flames can never be extinguished. The radio crackled with her squadron mates' voices as they formed up around her, but for just a moment, Zara could swear she heard another voice, older, familiar, filled with pride. "That's my little Thunder," it seemed to whisper. "That's my girl." And as the formation of F-16s disappeared into the vast blue expanse of sky, their thunder echoing across the landscape below, anyone watching might have noticed that the lead aircraft seemed to fly with just a little more grace, a little more purpose than the others. After all, some people are born to fly. And some dreams are too powerful to be destroyed by those who lack the vision to see their beauty. That you've just witnessed the incredible journey of Zara Okafor, a woman who refused to let discrimination clip her wings. Her story reminds us that justice isn't always immediate, but it's always worth fighting for. What dreams have you refused to give up on? What obstacles have you overcome to prove your worth? Share your story in the comments below, because every dreamer deserves to have their thunder heard. If this story inspired you, subscribe to our channel for more incredible tales of triumph over adversity. Because the best stories aren't just told, they're lived. This has been the Black Side Stories. Until next time, remember, behind every great achievement is someone who stood watch, someone who believed, someone who preserved what matters when no one else was looking.